Bonjour, Kinamagi and Ireland Indigenous, and welcome to today's social studies lesson. Today's topic, Social Studies Chapter 2, Section 3, the Eastern Woodlands. All right, we're going to begin here back on Turtle Island. And as a reminder, we started out in the Pacific Northwest, this region over here along the Pacific Ocean, very mountainous, lots of lush cedar forests. Then we moved to the Southwest, which is more arid, which means dry, the home of the ancestral Puebloan people. And now we're over here in this very large region known as the Eastern Woodlands. The Eastern Woodlands is quite often split into two groups. The Southeast, kind of right here, starting at the Ohio and going south, and the Northeast. Looking into Michigan, you can see that we are in the Northeast, surrounded by our Great Lakes. The three tribes that we talk about most are the members of the three fires here in Michigan: the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi. You should know all three of those as members of the three fires. And the point of this lesson is we really want to be able to talk about the life of the Ojibwe and other Eastern Woodlands nations, and then also be able to compare it with those living on the Pacific Northwest coast, the Southwest, or on the Great Plains. It should be understood that this is a generality. There are going to be nations that do things slightly different depending on their circumstances and what they had access to in their environment. During this lesson, we'll be watching parts of a couple different videos. So I'm going to move into the next one, the tribes of the forest. And quite often you will see the word tribes used for nations. I know that personally I do use both, but I prefer the term nation when I can. So let's go ahead and cue this one up. A video segment from Discovery Education.
The people of the forest had many names. Ojibwa, Powhatan, Fox, Seminole, and many others. Each had different names. Each spoke different languages, but they all did many things alike. They were great hunters, hunting deer, moose, and other game animals. In the winter, northern tribes wore snowshoes for trekking and hunting. Some tribes used toboggans pulled by dogs. They fished the lakes and rivers, sometimes at night, with spears and torches. And they all made their homes from what the forest provided them, often using the bark of trees to cover their wigwams and teepees. They also made beautiful baskets from the bark of trees. Bowls were carved from wood. Wood was used for many items, a child's toy canoe. This gourd was used as a musical instrument. This is a beautifully carved flute. Some tribes carved unusual masks which were used in special ceremonies. Weapons were also made from the forest. These are war clubs. And from animals, the forest people made their clothing and ornaments. A shell necklace, a bear claw necklace, a deerskin ornament. The forest people felt closely related to all things in the natural world. They felt everything in the natural world had a spiritual life, and that everything was connected to everything else in a spiritual way.
Looking back at Turtle Island again, just gotta give you some. We know that the Seminole were located down here in Florida, Powhatan over here along the East Coast. So the Ojibwe right here. The Creek were in this region. You can see where the relationships are. Here, the mountains kind of also forming a buffer between our tribes that are located closer to the coast and those located up here in the interior plains. Our next video segment, Life in the Ojibwe Tribe. There will be a couple pieces of this video, trying to keep on topic with what we're studying. It's a narrative form of a young lady telling about their life while under the pretense that she wants to do things that the boys are doing. So we're going to focus not necessarily on her story, but on how she is describing life for our people.
None of the others lived in an environment quite like this one. The eastern woodlands, the land of the forest people. A land of vast forests, rivers, lakes, and streams. What would it have been like to have lived back then? To have lived like one of the woodland tribes, the Ojibwe, in the upper Great Lakes, hundreds of years ago.
That's my brother, Little Bear, coming back from hunting with my father. Boys get to do all the fun and exciting things. Girls, we do all the work. It's not fair. It's just not fair. By the way, my name is Wabagons. It means little flower. I hate that name. It's just not me. I mean, I would be the best hunter in our clan if they'd only let me. But they won't let me because they say hunting is for boys. It's just not fair. My brothers go hunting almost every day. They also get to set traps and snares. Here, my dad and brothers are setting a snare. First, a tree is bent over. Then the trigger is set. This has to be set very carefully. Finally, a noose is placed across an animal trail. When a small animal runs through the noose, it releases the snare. It's just a stick, but it could have easily been a rabbit. For larger animals, we might use a pit trap. Branches are first placed over a pit, and then they are covered with leaves. My father will then place some bait, in this case, a whitefish, directly over the trap. When an animal, like an opossum or raccoon, tries to get the bait, it'll fall into the trap. Trapping is fun, but today is a great day for hunting, and I know several good places just across the lake. But how do I get there? My father's canoe. I'm sure he wouldn't mind if I borrowed it. In fact, if I came back with a deer or even muckwa, that's what we call a bear, he would be very proud, and I would prove to everyone in our village that I'm the best hunter that ever lived. I remember the time my brother made his first kill. All the people were so excited. They treated him like a hero. And it was just a deer. The way everyone carried on, you would have thought it was muckwa. Instead of my brother, and it won't be a deer. it'll be mukwa. It's time for a girl to do some of the exciting and dangerous things. It seems like all we ever do is work. Like peeling bark. Every summer, my mother and I go to the forest to find birch trees that are ready for peeling. Before the bark is peeled, my mother first makes a tobacco offering to the Great Spirit, Gichimanido.
Manidu, Adapanan, Asema.
Gichimanido provides us with all the things our people need, and we must always be thankful. My mother starts by making a cut in the birch using a stone knife. The knife is very sharp, but birch bark is very strong, and my mother usually has to repeat the cut in the same place. Even as she cuts, you can sometimes hear the bark popping underneath. When the cut is complete, the bark seems to almost pop off the tree with just a little bit of help. When done properly, bark peeling will not kill the birch. This tree will eventually seal itself. We use large sections of bark like this to cover our wigwams. Wigwams are made each season when we move our camp. Saplings are bent over and tied together with yigub. That's the inner bark of the basswood tree, and it's very strong. This forms the basic frame of the wigwam. Cross branches are then added to give the wigwam greater strength. As you might have guessed, women are the ones who put up wigwams. Since this is a summer wigwam, my mother will unroll a cattail skirt around the bottom. The cattails will allow a little wind to blow through the wigwam, helping to keep it cool. Finally, birch bark sections are added to the frame, starting just above the skirt. My mother uses a bone awl to punch holes in the bark. And then she slips in a wigwam strip to tie the bark to the frame. It'll take over 30 sections of bark to completely cover a wigwam. We also use birch bark to make our baskets and containers. First, a guide is placed over a section of bark. A burned stick is used to trace the outline. A stone knife is then used to cut the outline out. It doesn't look much like a basket yet, but it will. The basket has to be folded, and holes are punched using a bone awl. A wooden peg is used to keep the flaps together until they can be stitched with wigwam. A well-made basket like this can be used for many things and might last a lifetime. Many of our things are made out of birch bark. Even this cradle board. It is said that Gichimanido gave us the birch tree so that we would never do without, but
So at this point, we've learned a little bit about how homes were constructed. We've learned about baskets, materials that you need from the birch tree. We see that they live amongst the woods. Now we're going to fast forward a little bit into the movie.
the spiritual elder performs other duties as well. When my mother mother builds a new wigwam. The elder will bless it, and all the people living there with burning sweetgrass. Sweetgrass is considered sacred by our people, and we use it in many of our ceremonies. I think I better tie up the canoe. This looks like a good spot. Should be plenty of muckwa around here. I was saying how women do most of the work. Another job my mother does is fire making. She does this by placing dry grass between two sections of wood and then inserting a spinning stick into a small bow. The bow will enable my mother to spin much faster than she could without it. The spinning causes the wood to heat up. If you've ever rubbed your hands together real fast, you know how rubbing causes heat. If you spin the stick fast enough and long enough, the wood gets very hot, causing the dry grass to smoke. Just the right moment, my mother will stop spinning and blow on the smoking grass. Not too hard and not too little, until a flame appears. I've seen my mother do this 1,000 times, and it still amazes me. After that, it's a simple job of adding twigs and sticks until you have a real fire. After the fire's made, it's time to cook dinner. We usually start by boiling some water. By the way, as long as there's water in the birch basket, it will burn. Then, we might add some meat, in this case, deer meat. To this we'll add some greens, like wild onions and roots. And one of our favorites, wild rice. This will make a very nice stew. I told you that men and boys never work. Well, hardly ever. They do make tools and weapons, if you could call that work. This is a fish trap my father is making. Once fish swim into the trap, they can't get out. Traps are left overnight, just a short distance from shore. Sticks are stuck in the water to direct the fish toward the trap. In the morning, it's just a simple job of wading up to the trap, opening the door, and collecting fish.
Whoa!
Some are bigger than others.
Whoa!
A simple thing like a bone provides us with another way of catching fish. After the bone is sharpened, it's tied to another section of bone. The result is a very effective fish hook. Another way we fish is with a net. The net is usually strung out at night, and fish are pulled in the next morning. Spearing is another way we catch fish. A spear normally has 3 points. The 2 outer points spread apart and then close to keep the fish on the spear. Spearing is practically always done at night. A birch bark torch is attached to the front of the canoe. Fish are attracted to the light. All the spearer has to do is wait for the right moment. We also have time for games. Our favorite boys' game is target practice. It's not only fun, but it teaches boys to become good hunters. Spear throw is another game that teaches boys to become good hunters. Every once in a while, the boys give me a chance, but I hate hate to show them up. I'm just about the best spear thrower in our village. I'm also just about the best at foot racing. And as far as double ball, I'm just about the best at this too. The idea is to pass the double ball to a teammate using a throwing stick and to keep it away from your opponents. One of my favorite games is lacrosse. The game is played with rackets and a ball. The team that scores the most goals wins. The boys hate it when we beat them.
And that's where I'll wrap up the video portion of this lesson. You've seen a lot of things in here that have been referenced in our cultural classes here at SCA. And it's always advisable to seek out one of our Kinamage Ine or Kinamage Kwe, and they're more than happy to talk with you about things that you may have seen in this video for further information. I strongly recommend it. It is a part of what we do here in our school. At this point, I'm going to end this broadcast. You should return to the Google Classroom to do the assignment. Hope you all have a Menogijigat and Bamapi.